Hi, this is Peter Sage, and a question I've been asked quite often recently has been to do with mentors and acquiring mentors and some of the people who have been mentors to me and have impacted my journey thus far. And so I want to show a little video where I'm going to invite you on a journey, if I may, to really follow the story of how the most impactful mentor that I've ever had in my life really came into being. And through this story, hopefully share with you some of the keys and tips and inspire you to go out and seek your own levels of mentorship and seek your own lessons when it comes to other people. Because at the end of the day, we all really stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, while I may share some of my messages that have impacted some of you, and I'm very humbled by that, all it is an extension of some of the incredible people I've been fortunate enough to learn from. Now, if you take that in a musical scenario, when we start to learn to play a musical instrument, we always start off by playing other people's music until we get to the point where we're confident enough and competent enough to compose our own, and at which point we start to sing our own song. But the music that we produce is usually influenced by some of the masters that we studied under. And it's the same with mentors, and certainly for me. And I have to say, I've been very privileged, very blessed to have a number of different mentors in many different areas of my life. I have mentors in business, I've got mentors in my personal relationships, I've got mentors in psychology. But the number one mentor I think that's had the biggest impact on my philosophy and model of the world has to be one man, and that is George Zaki. Now, George is one of the best kept secrets, I believe, in personal development, but his teachings have really impacted me in many different ways. But I want to share the story, if I may. I don't think I've ever shared this on camera before, as to how I actually met with George, because looking back, there's some great lessons that I hope to share with you that can hopefully inspire you to follow similar journeys in your life. Now, when I was a young man, 18 years old, I kind of had nothing. I remember I was driving to a seminar on personal development, and I had a little Mini at the time, and again, 6'3", and a Mini doesn't really work. This is the old Minis before Minis were cool. And I remember it was in Manchester, England, and I went to this 2-day seminar. I could just about afford the ticket and the gas or the petrol to get there. And there were 600 people in the seminar. Now, I didn't have any money, but I had a lot of personal power. I had a lot of determination. I had a lot of resourcefulness, which, if you understand, resourcefulness is far more powerful than resources. The ultimate resource is resourcefulness when you really peel back the layers and look at people who have created magic in their lives. So I remember when the doors opened, 600 people, I had my ticket and I had a front row seat. Now, that wasn't given, it was just that I was going to get to the front row no matter what, because my personal power was I was there. I wanted to learn about how to become more successful. And anyway, the first day went through and we had a lot of speakers and it was very motivational. And I remember that night I was sleeping in the car because I couldn't afford a bed and breakfast that night. And I was in an old underground car park, and I remember it was raining, the water was dripping through the ceiling in this concrete underground parking lot, and I was freezing. And I couldn't turn on the engine because I knew that if I did that to warm up the car, I wouldn't have enough gas to get home. Anyway, the next morning, I was hardly slept. It was light about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I started to drive back towards the convention center where the seminar was taking place. And I remember driving past a country club. And again, I didn't have resources, but I had resourcefulness. I was in this cramped, creased, cheap suit that my mum had bought me for my first job interview that luckily I never got. And I looked a mess. I was disheveled, and kind of classic 18-year-old sleeping in a car that was too small for him, let alone anything else. But I drove past this country club. Anyway, I pulled in. There was nobody around, and I kind of walked in, kind of blagged my way through. And I found the sauna and the steam room and the changing rooms. And I went in, I remember, and I hung up my suit in the steam room so all the creases dropped out. I had a shower, I looked fresh, I got dressed again, and I drove to the convention center. And at 9 o'clock, the doors opened. And again, I ran to the front. I elbowed everybody out of the way, and I sat in the front row with my pen and my pad. Again, the desire to want to learn, to want to be better was a huge part of what put me on the track of self-improvement to become who I am today. Now, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd heard a whole load of other speakers, and most of it was standard personal development. It was warm bath motivation. It was like hype you up. But the challenge with that, as most people find, is that when you leave, having gone to a feel-good seminar that tells you you can do it and everything's positive and motivational, Monday morning you got a flat tire, because the same patterns of thinking that stopped you before, that caused you to need motivation, stop you again. So we were all ready to go and sell the world. There was just one more speaker that had come over from America, some dude called George Zaki, and we're like, well, okay, hurry up and come speak because we want to go sell the world. Anyway, George came out, and this is, I'm 18 years old, so 25 years ago. And George got on stage, and he spoke not for an hour, which was his slot. He spoke for 2 hours. He overran for an hour, but he blew me away because he was addressing things that I'd never heard in personal development, even though my knowledge was limited at that time. But still to this day, I've never really heard people explain things the way George did about understanding and disarming negative emotions. He got a standing ovation for over 5 minutes. It was like almost tearful. And at that point, I ran to the back of the room where they sold all the tapes and the books and the bonus stuff that you could buy. And I'm like, what have you got on that guy? And they said, well, we've got this one tape. It's called Profile of a Champion. I'm like, how much is it? Anyway, I borrowed the money. I begged somebody in the back of the room to lend me the money, and whether through it was desperation or just to get rid of me, I don't know, or took pity on me for having no resources, they lent me the money, and I got this tape. And I remember listening to it in the Mini on the way home over and over and over again. Anyway, a lot of the stuff I learned from there, which forms some of the teachings that I share now to this day and build upon, some of the music that I sing now has its genesis in some of the things I learned on that tape. And I became somewhat successful at a young age. As some of you know my story, and I built several businesses early on and became very financially successful. Anyway, when I lost my first business, it was an advertising company that I'd set up, and we've done $1 million in our first year. It was great. There's a lot of energy, but we got hit for a bad debt. And it was a business model that I put that essentially meant I couldn't trade out of it. It was one of those lessons that we learn. And I had to make 17 people redundant that day. It was the first time I'd ever laid anybody off. And I felt really down. And I thought, you know something? If only I could listen to that tape again. So I looked around and tried to find it, but it'd been lent out and lost years before. So I called a friend of mine that I remember was also at that seminar. I said, do you remember that guy called George Zaki? He said, yes. The guy's name was Charles Thomas, great guy. And I said, Charles, do you remember George? Do you have his tape? And he says, well, let me have a look. And he says, oh, I've got a couple of tapes here from George called Mind and Emotions. I'm like, can you send them? And true to his word, the next day, these tapes showed up, and I listened to them, and it was more really powerful wisdom. And there was a number to call, because I really still wanted that tape, Profile of a Champion. So I called this number. It was in New Hampshire, but the number was discontinued. Now, at that point, I thought, what do I do? But I did some more research, and I found another number for the same company that had moved to, I think it was Florida at the time. So I called that number, and a woman answered the phone, marketing girl or what have you, telesales, and I says, oh, hi, excuse me, my name's Peter Sage, I'm a young kid in England. I said, have you ever heard of a guy called George Zaki? They said, yes, we have. I said, oh, great, do you sell his tapes? He says, yes, we do. I says, oh, brilliant. I'm after this one tape called Profile of a Champion. She says, oh, that's quite an old tape. We don't get much of a call for that now. Let me go check. She comes back, says, yes, we've got it in stock. Says, how much is it? She says, it's $5. I'm like, send me 10. And a list of everything else that he does. And so I remember I was on the phone and I'm paying for the tapes that I just bought. And all of a sudden I get very emotional and I start crying, and I'm a mess on the phone, and I'm like, oh, I just got this realization. And I said to this woman, I said, listen, I'm really sorry. I said, I'm a bit of a mess right now. I said, but the first time that I got this tape, I had to borrow the money to buy it. I says, I'm now paying, I was 23 then at the time. I says, I'm now paying with my American Express Platinum card. I'm doing really well financially. I said, and a lot of it's because of some of the stuff I learned there. I said, if you ever get to meet this guy, if you ever get the chance to even say hello to him, just please, from me, just from some young kid in England he'll probably never meet or remember, just say thank you. She says, oh, I'll be sure to tell him that next time I see him. She says, oh, do you know him? I said, know him. I'm married to him. And it was his wife, Eloise. And she manned the phones, and they did the little business together and sold his tapes. And I was like, we became friends, and I ordered a lot of his stuff, and I got into it. And I always said to Eloise, whenever I'd speak to her, I said, look, whenever you guys are in England, I don't care if you're just changing planes, please call me, we'll do lunch. Anyway, years later, I get a phone call out of the blue. I was like, Peter Sage, yes, George Zaki speaking. He talks like that. I'm like, it's like having your favorite pop star call on the phone. I was got him on quite a pedestal at the time. And he was coming to England, and he appreciated the work that I was doing, and he got a business opportunity. And anyway, I went down and I met George in London. It was a magical time. We became friends. And one of my most magical memories of George is I remember I picked him up from Heathrow one time, and we were going up on the train to Leicester, to my hometown. He was going to meet my parents for the first time. And we're on the train, and I got the tickets. We're traveling first class, and we're having dinner as part of the first class ticket price. And we were talking and exchanging sort of ideas and concepts around some of the business ideas we were talking about. And all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, stop. And I reach and I get my diary. And I open my diary, and on the front page of my diary back then, I had a list of the goals that I'd written when I was 18 years old. All of the things that, you know, when you're 18, you look forward and you've got your vision boards and your dreams and your desires and your aspirations of what you want out of life. And on the top of that, I'd written, I wanted to have dinner with 3 of the top mentors. And at the time I wrote this, there was no way I could connect. Now, one of those was a guy called Tony Robbins. Now, in 2002, I became Tony's youngest trainer at that time. I've been very blessed to have spent many, many years traveling around the world, working with Tony, helping many people and learning lots in the process. Another person I wrote down there was Jay Abraham, who at the time was one of the world's best marketing experts, still is to this day. And I think 2004, I became business partners with Jay in a venture, and you know, that had a huge impact on my life as well. But I'd also written down George Zaki. Let's have dinner with George. And I remember saying, give me a pen. And I grabbed the pen and I went, check. And the feeling was just so overwhelming that you could actually, from a place of being 18 with no resources, but a desire to want to go out and create, you know, your own life, actually manifest things like that. And since then, George and I, as I say, have stayed friends, and he's a gentle giant. He's kind of the same size as Tony Robbins. He's about 6'8". And yeah, I've helped out with his kids, and we've become great friends. But the moral of the story here, guys, and the reason I wanted to share that with you, is that if you are trying to do life as a solo sport, it's going to get pretty lonely. If you're trying to figure out life by making your own mistakes, it's going to get pretty costly. But if you look around and think, who resonates with me? Who would be willing to teach me, or whose lessons do I want to learn from in a world where we now have push-button access to the greatest minds in history and what they've taught us? Whereas most people go and spend their time on Facebook or trying to get as many likes on a post as they can. Now, I'm here to tell you, if you spend time on social media trying to get more likes, the most important like that you want is the like you give yourself before you press post. If you're out there just wasting time, it's like TED. If you discover TED, you give up television. I've recently posted some of my TED Talks that I've done. TED is an incredible platform of inspirational ideas. And go plug in. There's so many people now that you can learn from that are willing to share and be inspired. But what I don't want you to do is sit there and think, who would give their time to me? We all have a gift. Mine just happened to be influenced by a beautiful man called George Zaki. I'd encourage you to check out his work at georgezalaki.com. I'll post it in the description as well. But go and spread your wings. Go and seek information from people who speak to you at your heart so that you can learn to play an instrument better and one day become a master yourself and compose the symphony of your life. And if we all do that, I promise you, we can make the world a much better place.